this is Andrei Sannikov and Belarus File. Today we're having an interview with James Sherr, one of the most knowledgeable experts on the region, who knows very well the situation in Russia, follows also the situation in Belarus, was in Belarus, so it will be a privilege to talk to him about the situation in our country. Hello, James. Good to see you. You are one of the best specialists on the region, I would say. And you also traveled to Belarus several times, I believe. And now you are living very closer to Belarus than before. So the question will be, of course, about Belarus and the situation in Belarus. And there is a window of opportunity in Belarus, yet again. By that I mean that it is visible today that Lukashenko is not supported at all. The people want changes. They are turning in big numbers to support a oppositional candidate, namely Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. I would say accidental candidate, but still, I think it underlines the desire of the people for changes. And once again, we hear from the West that the Kremlin might interfere, and the attempts to think what Kremlin might do instead of thinking about Belarus per se. Because for several times in our history, we had such critical moments when the situation could have changed, but because of lack of understanding and lack of priorities, which would include Belarus, these attempts were futile. So what do you think of this time? And is it the right approach to see Minsk via Moscow, through Moscow's eyes?
Well, first, pose a lot of questions, each of which are serious in their own right. First of all, what creates a window of opportunity in a situation like this? It can only arise if the democratic impulse goes beyond civil society to workers, the countryside, ordinary people. And it was only after these things happened, after several attempts, that when these three things finally joined up in Poland, then and only then regime change became unavoidable. This is plainly happening in Belarus. Has it happened yet? Well, we will soon find out. I'm inclined to think this new opportunity finally is here. So that is the first point. As to Russia, whatever our moral fortitude, not to think about Russia would be to abandon judgment. So let's understand why Russia is important. Not only from Putin's point of view, from the point of view of the entire Russian defense and security and most of the political elite and most other people. Without Belarus, Russia ceases to be a great power. And then let's add the Putin factor, because for Putin it is personal. He came to power in order to reverse the dissolution of what was the Soviet Union and restore Russia. This matters deeply to him. So it is not simply a matter of legitimacy, it's a matter of psychology. But if he relies on his KGB training, which is very disciplined about the relationship between means and ends, it is not inevitable at all that even if Lukashenko is replaced by someone else, that Russia will intervene. Because whoever runs Belarus, Russia is going to be a very powerful, determinant player. Belarus is far more dependent upon Russia than Ukraine has ever been upon Russia. So let us hope that there will be people who matter, who Putin listens to, who will advise through the usual methods to try to work things out pragmatically with a successor. And my last point to you is that I don't think it is entirely fair to say that the West is prioritizing Russia. Of course, some are. I mean, the West has many interests, many voices. But the more recent people who are thinking ahead about national interests and Western interests, they're not doing that. What a lot of them are doing instead is prioritizing the independence and sovereignty of Belarus over human rights. Maybe this is a false choice, maybe it is not. But there are choices here, and there are serious dilemmas, but that is what this discussion is actually about.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You made a very important point, and I think it's an excellent point that probably Putin will also see that relations with Belarus are much more important than relations with Lukashenko. I also think so, because there is interdependence, whether it's good or bad, but it's a fact of life. And so the democratic change of political system and government doesn't mean any changes for the relationship with Russia, for good or for better, or for worse. So the next question is, Russia is dominant in Belarusian politics. The West is almost invisible, which is also a unfortunate situation, because we would like to see more West in Belarus. But what can West do to help Belarus in this moment? For a number of years, I advocated the leaders of European Union to come to Minsk in critical moments like this coming 9th of August to prevent violence, because we hear threats. What do you think the West could do to help protect people, to help protect human rights, and to prevent unfortunate developments?
Let's understand, Andrei, that the main reason the West has been invisible is that Lukashenko has wished to keep it invisible. If you look at everything taking place under the umbrella of the Eastern Partnership, there is an enormous amount there. Now, here is the dilemma. If we think the worst, as we must, and thinking the worst is not predicting the worst, it's thinking about the possibility of the worst, the elections will be, the results, the protests will be repressed very severely, more so than in 2010. And then, obviously, the West faces a challenge. But what do we actually do? I am more concerned about what we should not do. There will be certain messages that our establishment is inclined to give at such moments that would be shameful and even fatal. If we are in that situation, that is not a time for us to be advising calm. And the worst thing is for us to be advising stability. If a pot is boiling, you don't get stability by putting a lid on the top and a brick on top of the lid. You get a bigger explosion. So if there is a revolutionary situation in Belarus, the West has to act carefully, but clearly and with firmness. And the first thing that needs to be said, and messages and narratives are very important, is that we firmly believe that the future of Belarus should be determined by its people, not by its leaders, not by its security services, and not by foreign actors. Now then, and I hope some people have thought about it already, we then have some very difficult choices. Should we suspend or expel Belarus from the Eastern Partnership if this happens? If we do, a lot of people will be hurt who have no connection with Lukashenko and who hate him. This is the problem. How do you calibrate a response in such a way that you damage the regime and its creatures without hurting those who we have been trying to help? If the moment is dramatic enough, then the response probably also will have to be dramatic. That should certainly include no US ambassador sent to Minsk. It would probably have to include at least the suspension of Belarus from the Eastern Partnership, and then, of course, the whole question of sanctions will need to be revisited, but hopefully by people in a position to know from previous restrictive measures what has worked and what has not.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think, again, you're absolutely right that sometimes the stability, notion of stability being most important for the international relations ruins everything. And probably that is why the European Union was so stubbornly pursuing the relationship with Lukashenko, with the regime of Lukashenko, lifting sanctions, which I think was a big mistake in 2016, ignoring human rights violations in general. It was another proof of realpolitik instead of hoping, let's say, helping to open up channels of communications, helping the civil society. That was realpolitik at work. Why is that? How can you explain it? Is it business interest? Is it lack of leadership in Europe, lack of understanding of the region?
I don't think it is purely realpolitik. If you impose sanctions on a political regime, you must also articulate conditions under which those sanctions will be either diminished or removed. And if those conditions are met, then you have to diminish or remove them. The conditions might not have been the right ones in the first place. Instead of realpolitik, I would say that many in the West have had illusions. Many in the West believe that Lukashenko really wanted to be far more integrated into Europe, even the Euro-Atlantic system, than he was. The truth, of course, is that he wished to have greater room for maneuver and greater autonomy and independence from Russia, and used the West to play a role in this. But the facts are, as he knew perfectly well, that when it came to energy, when it came to the whole economy, when it came to everything, Russia held all the cards, and would continue to hold the cards as long as the system of governance in Belarus was the way Lukashenko was determined to keep it. So these have been the main concerns, and there has been, because I've sat in some of these meetings, with genuine concern about what could be done to advance the situation in the country, meanwhile understanding this man is there and this man is in charge, and we can, at least for the moment, do nothing about this. And there's another factor, and here realpolitik intrudes, and it should intrude. The Russians not only define, they genuinely believe that a colored revolution is, in the words of Gerasimov, a state coup organized from abroad. They do believe that this is this is a collective psychosis. And from about 2013, you could not challenge this belief at all. And, therefore, if there is a prospect of Russian intervention, and they are thinking in this way, then Belarus's neighbors, who are members of NATO as well as the EU, could face a very, very real problem. And when President Trump then withdraws 11,000 troops from Germany and takes almost 7,000 of them back to the United States, this problem does not get any easier. So we have to consider all of this. But if the alternative to a known risk is even a bigger risk, then you have to try to deal with a known risk. And that requires firmness, clarity, and courage. And I wish I saw more of that of those qualities that I see now in Europe.
Yeah, firmness, clarity, and courage. Great words. Thank you very much, James. I wish your wisdom be inserted more in international narrative, especially analytical and strategic planning narrative on the issue of Belarus. But I hope we'll see changes quite soon in Belarus. So, живе Belarus! Long live Belarus!
Thank you so much, Andrei. I look forward to talking again.